What's up, everyone? Ben with the BTC Sessions here, and this is your daily session.
Hodl the Bitcoin.
Before we jump in, just a couple quick things. Of course, shout out to the sponsor of the show, Ledn.io. This is where you can use your Bitcoin for a couple of different services. One is a Canadian or US dollar loan using your Bitcoin as collateral. There's a quick sign up that takes a couple minutes, and if you're approved, you typically are funded to your bank account within 24 hours. And the second is a Bitcoin savings account where you can be making 5.1% in Bitcoin on your Bitcoin. So be sure to check them out. Also, if you do decide to secure a loan and you use the link I provide below, they will supply your account with an additional $50 worth of Bitcoin. And secondly, if you are at all into Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, privacy is of paramount importance. And of course, a VPN always helps with that. It can help obfuscate your browsing history and keep your browsing history private. It also helps with things like, say you're dabbling in torrents, or perhaps you'd like to access some geo-blocked content. Well, you can set your country to a different country of origin and access all the content you like. So if you use the link down below, you can get 75% off a 3-year plan. It ends up being only about $3 a month, so pretty damn good. Feel free to check that out. And with that, let's dive into the news. The price has been a bit of a wild ride the last little bit. Of course, last week we saw it peak up around $13,800 and beyond. It has since dropped down quite a bit. We've had a 25 to 30% pullback. Earlier this morning and kind of last night, we actually saw it dip below $10,000. I saw it at one point around 9,700, which would have been around a 30% pullback. Well, now we're sitting back up around the $10,800 range, and we've been peaking up pretty close to 11K again. So yeah, volatile to say the least. With that said, we haven't really seen too much exciting happening with alts either. When you look at everything, there's been mass calls for alt season, and they have been largely unanswered. If you look across the board, everything's pretty flat. Bitcoin's back up about 3% with that kind of bounce back up to the almost 11K range, but everything else is kind of hurting. And again, and I showed this last week, but if you really zoom out and you start to look at the 7-day or even 90-day change versus Bitcoin, it is brutal. Alts are getting crushed in this market, and that's interesting. Given that we've seen quite a turnaround, and it has been more or less a bull market for Bitcoin, but largely not for anything else. If you take a look across the board, there are some outliers. Obviously, there's some crazy pumps happening in a few, but like if you're rolling the dice, what are the chances that you're going to hit one of these cash cows? Probably not great. A lot of these double digits, and we're talking like in some cases 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% down versus Bitcoin. So if you had rolled the dice there, it has not been treating you well. Now, in relation to the price, the Binance chief strategy officer is basically calling for Bitcoin to rally to $100,000. I mean, obviously take any stuff like this with a grain of salt, but let's take a look at what he has to say. So obviously, like I said, we've had a pullback from the recent highs that we've seen, so 25 to 30% full pullback so far. But he had to say, if you look at historical patterns, we're probably looking at new highs, at least for Bitcoin, in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. Now, this does talk about the massive losses in altcoins, but the total capitalization has shrunk by $80 billion since last week. However, Bitcoin's share of that remains over 60%. So even with the shedding of the price, most of that tends to be in the alts. A lot of alts, higher cap coins, including Ripple, Bitcoin Cash, Cardano, Stellar, Tron, are still down over 80% and sometimes 90% from their highs. So even with the resurgence in Bitcoin, it's been kind of rough. But yeah, it should be interesting to see. I'd personally love to see those kinds of prices. I don't know. This year, again, as I've been saying for weeks now, this year has surprised the hell out of me. And I would continue to be delightfully surprised if we saw those kinds of prices. And from one Binance C-suite level person to another, CZ, the CEO, is in the news for his clashes with Nouriel Roubini, who is an economist and notorious Bitcoin troll. He's nicknamed Dr. Doom. But essentially, Nouriel's been touring around doing crypto conferences, apparently. I did not know this. But essentially, he just shows up to bash the hell out of everything, which is kind of funny. But so anyways, essentially CZ saw a tweet and somebody at one of these conferences said Dr. Doom dropping the knowledge on this crypto conference. And CZ replied with, for a guy that doesn't see the future of crypto, but spends his days attending crypto conferences, this is the second conference in Asia I overlapped him this year. Does he have anything to do? Maybe he's actually just Satoshi in disguise. Now, Nouriel saw this and retweeted it and was not nearly as playful in his response. He said, the most pathetic critique I have heard about me is from this jerk, CZ. I was chosen as the third most influential person in the world of crypto space because I am the only honest critic of this shitty space who isn't talking his book 24/7 the way you do, you snake oil peddler. Holy Christ. After which CZ replied, who's the jerk here? A guy who builds what he believes in, or a guy who goes to crypto conferences just to call Bitcoin a scam? Yeah, Nouriel is not known to mince words. It's funny because on most alts, I agree with Nouriel. I just think he missed the mark with Bitcoin because there's such an influx of bullshit in the space. It's easy to conflate it all and miss the promise that Bitcoin offers. But yeah. Anyways, so on this Nouriel train, he's actually set to have a debate with the CEO of BitMEX, Arthur Hayes. Now, Arthur Hayes, awesome guy. I actually got to meet him before the crazy bull run. I met him in 2016 in Hong Kong. He was super nice. He had me up to his office. I got to sit down, and that's when his office was just a single room with like a laptop. And it's hilarious because now they've got like a full floor of the most expensive real estate on the planet in downtown Hong Kong. Things change quickly in the space. Anyways, yeah, Arthur Hayes is going to debate Nouriel Roubini. His tweet says, bring it on, baby. By the time we are finished on stage, you will be jonesing for an account with us. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that debate. Should be a good time. And with that, let's move on. We've been talking a lot about Libra and the Facebook coin lately, and the pushback that it's been getting from regulators and watchdogs. Well, there's a new group of watchdog groups that are calling for Congress to put a freeze on Facebook's Libra coin. And so what did they have to say? They said, we call on Congress and regulators to impose a moratorium on Facebook's Libra and related plans until the profound questions raised by the proposal are addressed. So they basically submitted a proposal to Congress to look into certain things, but it does kind of come across like they don't even really understand how this stuff works, and they've done minimal looking into it. Otherwise, they would probably realize at least a few things about it. It seems like they've essentially done no research whatsoever. So some of the questions that they ask here, they're asking about what impact Libra might have on the monetary policy of small and developing countries. They also say, wouldn't Libra provide an easy mechanism for money laundering? Would the Libra Association apply the anti-money laundering rules imposed by many nations? Would its technology even permit know your customer type standards? Will all wallet providers be required to adhere to such rules? Should a private association be in the business of applying such standards? We have too much recent experience with insufficiently regulated financial markets spinning out of control to let this happen again. So, referring to the 2008 financial crisis, the Facebook proposal must be put on hold until these numerous and fundamental questions are resolved. Now, this is not a binding document. Nobody has to act on this, but again, it's just a watchdog group trying to kind of shove themselves in there and create some questioning. Now, I find this funny on a couple of counts. Number one, from their questions, they don't really understand how things work, nor do they realize that any locally based businesses in the US or most other Western countries are already subject to KYC AML if they're an on or an off ramp. However, it also kind of points to the fact that they don't understand how wallets work. They don't understand how Libra itself would be governed, which is kind of laid out in their white paper. And they don't understand that all this shit is null and void because Bitcoin already exists. So it is funny. I also found it funny here how they're referring to the fact that insufficiently regulated financial markets let the 2008 crash happen. However, in my view, it was the lack of kind of free markets that allowed it to essentially everybody to kick the can down the road for that to build up and for us to be in a way worse position today. Imagine back in 2008 had those poor banking practices resulted in those banks just folding instead of the bailouts that they got. It puts a very real price on the risky tactics that they had partook in, and in the future, banks would then think, had certain banks been allowed to fail, well, we better be careful because there's nobody that's going to bail us out if we screw around and really mess up our business. I'm of the opinion that, as terrible as it would have been, those banks should have been able to fail. The problem now is that we've set this precedent of just, okay, well, whatever you do, we'll just print more money because we're too scared of what will happen if we let you fail. And I'm sure it will come to a point where they do it again until it gets to the point where it's just rampant hyperinflation. Now, how long will it take that to happen? They're pretty good at kicking the can down the road. But it will come to that point where there's just no option and the currencies just become useless. And now that we have this off-ramp, you actually have that comparison side by side where you see the impacts of poor and good monetary policy. So I guess we will see moving forward how that happens. Moving on, again, Blockstream has debuted something called Liquid Swap Tool, or the Liquid Swap Tool for Bitcoin and other crypto assets. So what is this? The Liquid sidechain is essentially something that is pegged to Bitcoin so that you can lock up Bitcoin on the main chain and then create a side asset called Liquid Bitcoin. You can also create tokenized fiat, basically a stable coin, or other set, uncreated assets, things like pegs to other crypto assets, things like pegs to real world assets. So essentially, they said that Liquid Network provides fast, secure, and confidential transactions to address the needs of exchanges, brokers, market makers, and financial institutions around the world. So the Liquid Swap Tool allows users to execute atomic swaps on the Liquid network for any issued asset such as liquid Bitcoin, tokenized fiat, crypto assets, attested assets, and more. So it's pretty interesting. Essentially, what it seems like to me is we're getting the functionality that ETH had on it to create the ICO boom, which I don't know how to feel about that. I'm all for people being able to create their own assets, people being able to invest in whatever the hell they want, and be able to peg things and freely trade amongst themselves. I also like that there's confidential transactions here. And the other interesting thing here is that you can actually, this is a Medium post by Grubles, not Grubles on Twitter, at not Grubles, and he put together a little bit of a tutorial on how to use C Lightning on the Liquid sidechain. So using Lightning with Liquid to do atomic swaps between any asset on Liquid and Lightning, Bitcoin, and all of that stuff. So essentially being able to trade all of these assets. It is tech heavy, so if you're not a developer or at least don't really know command line, maybe not for you, but I mean, you can play around, no big deal if you want to. But it is very interesting to see how this is developing. I'm wondering if the next kind of bubble of digital assets ends up being built on top of Bitcoin. I think part of the reason that Ethereum got pumped so much was because it was the vehicle to build digital assets on a native chain. And with this, we could see a whole new round of that. I guess we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I'm happy that people are building things. I guess, yeah. Now, obviously, there's a lot more competition in the space because you had Ethereum, and that was kind of the only game in town. But now we've got stuff on top of Bitcoin, which, again, is the most widely used digital asset out there, and the most well-known. But then you also have other alternative chains that essentially can do exactly what Ethereum can do. So maybe this won't have as much impact as it would have a few years back, but I guess time will tell. And one other thing to mention here, we put up a blog post today from Bull Bitcoin regarding our use of CoinJoin on the exchange. So if you're in Canada, of course, you can check us out and know that coins that are being used to pay bills on our platform and then sold to other users are CoinJoined in between by default. This just helps kind of obfuscate where the coins have come from and gone to so that people on either side of the sell or the buy cannot trace the coins back and see their history. So it protects the user, the history of bills users, and it also protects the buyers from the people whose coins they've just bought so that neither person can kind of see either way. Of course, there is still a link to Bull Bitcoin in the purchase or sale of your coins. So we always recommend that you CoinJoin on your own separately from the service, either before you sell to the service or before you buy, or sorry, after you buy from the service. And it helps break up those links between you and your coins and just helps you maintain financial privacy. But do take a look through this article. Lots of good stuff in here to check out. And with that, I'm going to wrap up, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'm glad to be back in my room here making videos with sound and everything. That isn't echoey as hell. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Of course, if you want to help out the show, hit up Ledn, links down below. Hit up the link for NordVPN if that's something that you need. And if you really liked what you saw, you can drop me a Bitcoin tip via the Lightning Network on my tippin.me page. With that, I am out. I will see you guys tomorrow for your daily session.